hopefully a question about what happened today in Midland and Odessa, and then a question about the significance of being here. Today in Midland and Odessa, we saw another horrific shooting in our nation. Our hearts are heavy for the victims of today's shooting and for their families. We're thinking about them, we're praying for them, and more than thoughts and prayers, we know that we have to act to prevent gun violence. 3 weeks ago in El Paso, we saw one more instance of a gunman who caused such pain and loss of life that we've seen too often in this country. We don't know all the details about what happened tonight in Midland and Odessa, but we do know that it is time for politicians to act to put common sense gun safety legislation into place. Universal background checks, limiting the capacity of magazines, a renewed assault weapons ban, because the AR-15 specifically has been, unfortunately, the weapon of choice for too many of these active shooters, and ensuring that we do things like have a 7-day waiting period. On top of that, to respond to situations like we saw in El Paso and in Charleston a few years ago, we know that we need to give DHS, DOJ, and the FBI the tools that they need to root out extremism, especially white nationalism these days, to stop it before it turns into the kind of violence that we saw in El Paso or in Charleston. We need to disarm hate in America. The most poignant moment, I thought, of the last 3 weeks happened in Ohio after Dayton. The governor of Ohio, Mike DeWine, was making comments about what had happened, and the crowd of Ohioans who were there, who were of every different background and I'm sure different political stripes, began to chant, "Do something, do something, do something." It is time for Congress and for state legislatures, including the one in Texas, to do something, not just talk. Here in Texas, tomorrow on September 1st, there are 8 new pieces of legislation that will make it easier for people to carry guns in this state. That legislation will make Texas less safe, not safer. The answer is not more guns. In just the last 3 weeks, we've had 2 instances, one where 5 people have died, or perhaps more, and one where 22 people died, in a state that has one of the highest rates of gun ownership, a state where you can have concealed carry, open carry, campus carry. That didn't make a single bit of difference to stop these gunmen. More guns is not the answer. Common sense gun safety legislation is the answer, and we need to do something about it. Thank you.
Can you be specific how politicians should act?
Politicians in Texas, in other states, and especially in the Congress of the United States need to pass a renewed assault weapons ban, limiting the capacity of magazines, universal background checks, a 7-day waiting period. They should raise the excise tax on ammunition and guns from 10% to 20%, and then use the $600 to $700 million of revenue that would garner annually to invest in gun violence prevention programs. And we also need to ensure that we teach a generation of kids in our country to resolve their differences without violence.
Thank you.
Does anyone have a question about the forum today, and then we have to go?
Yeah, anybody have a question
Yeah,
about the
one
city?
question. How would you do that when NRA is that much strong and there is the strongest lobby?
The NRA is losing power all the time. The NRA is a shadow of what it was a few years ago, and the way that you can tell that is that there are many more politicians that are running openly against the NRA. They don't scare people the way that they used to, and the loss of that fear among politicians is the beginning of their downfall. That's why I believe that we're going to see common sense gun safety legislation sooner rather than later. Does anybody have a question about being
Were you
here?
surprised that you and Senator Sanders were the only candidates who came today? What kind of message do you think that sends to the community about the race?
If I'm elected, hey Bernie, you want to get in on answering why you and I were the only 2 to come today?
You finish up.
All right. Well, first of all, let me commend Senator Sanders for being here, and I know that he has a track record of speaking on many of the issues that we addressed today. Look, if I'm elected president, I want to be a president for all Americans. I want to be a president that represents everybody. And too oftentimes, Muslim Americans in our country have been scapegoated, they've been otherized, they've been targeted. We need to end that. We need to work with the Muslim American community to ensure that they can prosper and reach their dreams in the United States as well. We also need to work with our allies and our adversaries overseas to ensure that human rights are recognized around the world, whether that's the Uyghurs in China or the human rights of Palestinians or of a number of other communities throughout our world. And I was proud to articulate that vision today.
Would you acknowledge the atrocities that are happening in Kashmir by India?
I would. I do, and I believe that India has a role to play as the world's largest democracy, and India is our ally. My hope is that India will live up to its status as the most populous democracy in the world. Hey, thank y'all.
Thanks, everyone. Thank you.
Senator,
Okay, let me just say a few words. We don't have a whole lot of time. I'm proud to be here. We have a president today who, in an unprecedented way, is trying to divide the American people up based on the color of our skin, based on where we were born, based on our religion, based on our sexual orientation. And that is totally un-American. That's not what this country is supposed to be about. As President of the United States, I would do exactly the opposite. I would bring our people together around an agenda that works for all of us and not just the 1%. And that was basically the message that I tried to deliver today.
Senator, everybody injured in Odessa, your thoughts on that?
My thoughts on it is that the American people are sick and tired and horrified by the never-ending violence. Excuse me, can you turn that thing off,
turn
please?
off the lights, please.
Please turn that thing off. Right. The American people are sick and tired and horrified by the never-ending mass shootings that we see virtually every week. Now, nobody will tell you with a straight face that there's a magical solution to this crisis, because you got some 300 million guns out there in the streets today, and you have at least 10 million assault weapons out there. But the very least that we can do for our children and for our communities is everything that is possible. And the American people are clear. They want an expansion of background checks. They want to do away with the gun show loophole. They want to do away with the straw man provision. And more, and a significant majority now, according to recent polls, want to ban the sale and distribution of assault weapons. That is what we should be doing. And let me tell you, one of the outrages that is going on in this country right now is that we have a Republican Party that ignores what the American people want and simply is intimidated by the NRA. As President of the United States, I will not be intimidated by the NRA. I'll do what the Americans do.
What's your message? Can we talk?
One at a time, please. Yeah.
Senators on Yemen.
On what?
On Yemen.
Yes.
Do you have any comment on the current situation in Aden and in the light of the infighting within the coalition with
Look, all I can tell you is, as you may know, I helped lead the effort in the Senate to pass for the very first time since the passage of the War Powers Act back in the 1970s to get the United States out of that horrific war in Yemen led by Saudi Arabia. I will do everything I can to get us out. What the people of Yemen need right now is an economy which is devastated, which stands at the brink of perhaps having the worst famine in modern world history. We have got to provide the humanitarian aid. We have to help rebuild that economy. The people of Yemen do not need more bombs. They don't need more destruction. The international community has got to act aggressively to get Saudi Arabia out of this war and to bring peace to that region.
What do you
Okay.
excuse me,
ma'am.
Yes, can we talk reparations? A lot of black voters are not happy with your stance on reparations.
Well,
and even with your speech today, you mentioned that immigrants built this company and actually enslaved Africans.
You're absolutely
built this
right.
Country.
Well, it's
So
not
is
either
it-
or, ma'am. It's not either or.
So
It's both.
is it possible to change that conversation so our ancestors we can get what our just due is?
Well-
what we were promised.
Well, what I believe is that the answer, and I believe what Jim Clyburn of South Carolina believes, and that is we need a massive program to rebuild distressed communities, which are often black communities in this country. And that means a very significant part of the federal budget goes to cities and communities of African American heritage. where we rebuild education, infrastructure, healthcare, and we give people what they need.
If you-
Okay, whoa.
Excuse me.
Senator,
Yeah.
Kashmir, India has locked it down.
Yes.
What are your
All right, look, what India did is an outrage. We need a United States government that speaks out on this issue, that demands that India take this issue to the United Nations and that we negotiate a solution. Right now, it is not only the fact that people cannot communicate outside the country, it's not only the fact that people are being thrown into jail. What is also true is we fear very much that people are not getting the basic health care that they need and that people will die as a result. So what India did is unacceptable. We need to take that issue to the United Nations immediately and come up with a negotiated settlement.
What is your
Yes,
message
ma'am,
to-
hold on one at a time,
Yes.
please.
What would be your stance for the Afghanistan? Like, if you win the election,
For-
so what would be the U.S. strategy with the engagement in Afghanistan?
In Afghanistan, look, the war in Afghanistan has been the longest war in the history of this country. And it is time for us to end U.S. intervention, to bring our troops home intelligently and safely in a pre-planned way, not in an arbitrary way. But I voted against the war in Iraq because I knew what kind of destabilization would occur. Sadly enough, much of what I said then turned out to be right. But we need an approach which says that we're going to bring people together to negotiate differences and not see more U.S. intervention. Maybe one or
Yes,
two more
what-
questions.
what-
All right,
what-
yes, sir,
what-
sir.
what-
One at a
Sure,
time,
sure.
please, please.
If you become president, are you going to have at least one Muslim cabinet member? My second question is, if you don't mind, Turkish people doesn't believe there was an Armenian genocide. What do you think about this subject?
I think there was a genocide, and we will have a cabinet that looks like America, and an administration that looks like America. Now, I can guarantee you that there will be one old white guy there. But yeah, hold it, please, you know. But it will be a cabinet that when people look at it, they say, you know what, this looks like what America is. We'll have people from different religions, different races, different backgrounds. And that is what we need, and that's what I'll bring back. All right,
Senator-
last question. Yeah, right here. Yeah.
Besides you, who can take down Donald Trump?
Senator, what would your message be to voters who are inclined to vote for Donald Trump? What do you have to offer for them?
All right, I think, and I understand that Texas voted for Trump. I think I would ask you to look in two separate areas. Are we really comfortable, regardless of what our political views are, to have a president of the United States who is a pathological liar? I mean, you know, do we really want to have a president who, when he gets on the air, we have to shut off the television so our kids do not hear the nonsense that he is talking about? And furthermore, I think, again, regardless of our political views, do we want to have a president who is a racist, who is a sexist, who is a homophobe, and who is a xenophobe? That's issue number one. Second issue is, Trump is not only a liar, he is a phony. When he ran for office, he promised the working families of this country that he would stand with them. Well, he lied. You don't stand with working families when you try to throw 32 million people off the health insurance that they have. You don't stand with working families when you have a tax plan that gives 83% of its benefits over a 10-year period to the top 1%. You don't stand with working families when your budget calls for massive cuts to Medicaid, Medicare, and cuts to Social Security as well. Thank you all very much.
Senator, right here, follow me. Follow me.
Would you be able to do it?
Guys, folks, thank you. Bernie will support you 100%.
I am not, after this answer.